Track Record with your hosts Mike Shea and Robert Yetter. Brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
Good morning, everyone. It's time for Track Record. My name's Robert Yetter.
My name is Mike Shea.
We're pleased that you have decided to join us on this lovely day. We've got an episode for you all. Today we're going to be talking about comeback albums. So we had a little discussion as to what that meant. We were trying to decide if we had a conversation about the difference between a breakup and a hiatus. I think the contention was that they're almost one and the same. It depends on the length, really. You know, if the hiatus is 10 years, then it's really I would call that a breakup. I don't know.
Well, I think it's a hiatus if they come back. You know, if they come back, it's a hiatus. If they don't, it's a breakup. Yeah.
But how do they know that they're going to come back? So that's the kicker. So if they came back, then they were actually on a hiatus. Even if they said they were like, "Hey, we're breaking up," and then they made an album 20 years later.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, it's six in one hand, half a dozen in the other. I mean, it's you can look at it any way. You can call it whatever you want, and you're probably not wrong. But typically for me, it's just if they do eventually come back, then you call it a hiatus. If you're like REM and you've never come back, then they're broken up.
I hear ya. Ooh, REM. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking Blue Moon tonight, my friend.
Blue Moon. Okay.
Blue Moon.
That's a turn from what your usual is.
Well, I was out of things to mix the bourbon with and didn't feel like straight bourbon.
Last time you did that, it didn't work out, right?
Well, I mean, the show was great, but afterwards I felt like shit. So.
I hear you.
We had a poker night with some comedians the other night. I brought some Blue Moon to the thing, so I had some left over.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Nothing like a room full of comedians, right?
Yeah. You drinking another one of those Reds Wicked?
Yeah, I still got some. I've been at work all week, so.
I looked for some of those actually the other day, and I couldn't find any.
They are good.
A little sad.
I like them.
They're good stuff. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I've got a nice easy drinking night tonight. Nothing hardcore. Yeah. Nothing too fancy.
That's good. Well,
so yeah, we're talking comeback albums today. There wasn't really any particular inspiration behind this. It was just, what haven't we do? Matters. What haven't we done yet? And originally we were like, well, what about if we did, farewell albums, the last album a band put out before they broke up, and then that's how we got into the discussion of, well, would you consider a breakup or hiatus? So we figured, well, let's just go ahead and do ones that did eventually come back, which kind of seemed a little easier to settle on.
That's right.
So, and we've got two very, very different albums today.
They could not be any different. I mean, if one of them was like Polka, then maybe, but these are pretty far apart. It would have to
be drastic.
So
these are very far apart.
Yeah, I went first last episode, and so I think you're going to go ahead and say your piece first up this time around.
Yeah. Did you want to introduce it at all, or you want me to just jump into it?
Yeah, I gave you an album called MBV by My Bloody Valentine. I think it was, I don't know, when did that come out? 2013? Yep. And so what was the gap?
That was a 22-year gap.
Wow. That is crazy. So
22 years.
My Bloody Valentine, they're shoegaze, which is one of my favorite genres. Not a very popular genre. I think it's a lot of people might not, it's not what's the word? It's just different. Like, it doesn't fit the mold. You know, they've got weird sounds. It just doesn't, it might not be pleasing to most people's ears, I think, but, yeah, I'll let you, I'm eager to see what you think.
All right, I'm going to try and stick to my script on this one. I don't want a repeat of the Smashing Pumpkins incident. Because when we did the one where I reviewed Smashing Pumpkins, for those who maybe don't remember, I kind of went a little off topic and spent the whole thing bitching about Billy Corgan's voice and didn't actually talk about the album. So stick to my script on this one. So in the 1960s, there was a band called Flight of the Conchords who did a song called Aquarius. You can hear this song if you watch The 40-Year-Old Virgin. It's at the end of the film. They all do it as a big, huge song and dance number. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. To me, and what this album sounded like was if Flight of the Conchords suddenly, out of nowhere, discovered the distortion pedal and cranked that shit up. Holy shit, have you guys heard of this new thing? It's called distortion. Let's use it a lot. This to me sounded like 60s flower power rock with a fuckload of distortion. Sorry for cursing, but it's a lot of distortion. It sounded to me like a high school band was still trying to find their sound, and the two lead guys in the band were having a clashing of styles. One wanted something softer and more traditional, and the one was like, nah, man, I want to be edgy and cool. Check out how much distortion I have on my guitar. And to me, that was kind of the reigning theme of this album, was very gentle melodies with lots and lots of distortion. I was not the biggest fan of this. Now, admittedly, this was kind of my first real foray into My Bloody Valentine. They were a band that I was aware of from working in radio, but had never really taken the time to get to know. Which is kind of a common theme for me on this show, I've noticed. Yeah, I heard the name working in radio. Never listened to him, but I knew the name working in radio.
Yeah.
You hear a name like My Bloody Valentine, and this is another case of like what we had with like Septic Flesh, where you hear the name and it sets a certain expectation, I guess, going into the music. I hear a band like Septic Flesh and I figure, oh, this is going to be like garbage noise metal. It's just weird and crazy for the sake of being weird and crazy. And it wasn't that. I hear My Bloody Valentine and I kind of went into it expecting some kind of old school like grunge rock or just something a little more on the darker or more aggressive side, which may have tainted my listening experience a little bit. To hear, oh, My Bloody Valentine, and you get something a little more light and airy and kind of up there. So that may have affected my listening experience a little bit. As I said before, this album, MBV, was released 22 years after their previous release, which was, Loveless from 1991. And the band's first album was Isn't Anything from 1988. And in those 22 years, I guess I would have hoped that the band would have evolved a little bit. Not necessarily changed altogether, but just kind of evolved with the times a little bit. A lot of bands who are around for a long time like that, when they do make the comeback, they're like, hey, let's see if we can blend in a little bit with what's popular right now, so it's not such a drastic contrast. But to me, it felt like they just were like, all right, well, let's not fix what ain't broken. Let's just do what we've been doing. Which would be fine, I think, if the band was a bit more established when they went away. Now, when they first were around, I mean, they were pretty big. I mean, they were making some waves. But, you know, only putting out 2 studio albums. They had a couple of EPs that came out in 2012. Nothing that really, like, made people lose their shit. But a couple of EPs. But this was their first full-length album in 22 years. And I just kind of felt like 22 years, man, could have done something a little more with it. 22 years of not writing music. I don't know. But going through this one beginning to end, I listened to this one beginning to end about 4 or 5 times. And I just kind of found myself a little bored with it. I didn't hate it. I found the lyricism pretty nice. I was a big fan of Kevin Shields' lyrics for the most part. But the overall music on the album, I just kind of found to be a little repetitive and mismatched. The production quality felt a little off. Like some things were a little uneven in the mixing process. I forget who the producer was on this album. Kevin Shields produced it. Okay. You know, I checked out Kevin Shields a bit, just kind of on his own in my own research of this album. He did something called the Choral C, which is a bunch of untitled songs he did with Patti Smith. That was not bad. It was pretty good. I like Kevin Shields as a songwriter, I think, as far as lyrics go. But yeah, I wasn't in love with what the sound of the music was. I wasn't totally sure what they were trying to go for, what sound it was they were trying to go for, whether it was something unique or something inspired by somebody else. It wasn't clear to me. So, but again, and I can't say this enough, like the lyricism alone makes the album worth checking out. And it's like you said earlier, this is definitely not something for everyone. This is something that, like, I feel like this is something you're either going to love it or hate it. For the sake of this podcast, I'm able to pick out certain things I liked and other things that I didn't. But for the casual listener, I think this is going to be something they're either going to love or they're going to hate. So, yeah, I just found myself kind of bored with this for the most part. I haven't listened to any of their earlier stuff, and I'm definitely going to check out the earlier stuff. Just for this show, there was not the time of day. You know, we only had a week. So, you know, for just this album specifically as it is, I just wasn't into it. But I'm curious to see what their other stuff sounds like, if it's on par with this or if it sounds totally different. I don't know. And I realize I'm also in the minority here. I know this album got crazy amounts of love. It received pretty much universal critical acclaim. The Guardian gave it 5 stars. The LA Times gave it 3.5 out of 4. Rolling Stone gave it 4 out of 5. think the lowest score this thing got was an 8 out of 10 in Spin Magazine. I mean, this album, everybody loved it. I know there's a book called 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die, and I know this is in that book. So I fully accept the fact that I'm putting a big target on my head right now by saying I didn't like this, and that's fine. That's the beauty of music, folks. It's all subjective. But yeah, I'm not gonna like bottom this one out, but I'm gonna give it 2 out of 4 purple stars for me. It was nowhere near the worst thing I've ever heard. I've listened to some crap for this show. Okay, Nine Inch Nails. I've listened to some crap for this show. This is like if we were to do like worst albums we've ever reviewed, this doesn't make the list. It doesn't make the list of worst albums I reviewed at all. But it's not making the best list either. I like I said, I was just bored with it. I can see where some people would be like, "Oh, this is the shit." It just wasn't for me. And from a personal standpoint, I work at a TV station, and so I have to put together those 30-minute infomercials. And while I was listening to this album, I also had to put together an infomercial for one of those Time Life music collections that have like 1,000 CDs or whatever from the decades. And the one I was working on was the 60s. And so as I was listening to this album and trying to figure out what it reminded me of, I edited a video that has Aquarius playing, and I was like, oh, that's what this reminds me of. 60s music. It did. It reminded me a lot of 60s music, which is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just like, okay, this sounds like I know they started in the 80s, but it really was reminiscent of the kind of thing you'd hear in the 60s.
Yeah, it's like some
as far as
new age hippie stuff.
Yeah. And like admittedly, like I'm not the biggest fan of 60s music to begin with. There's some great music that came out of the 60s, and there's no doubt. But for the most part, stuff that I like and listen to regularly pretty much started in the 70s. So yeah, MBV by My Bloody Valentine, their 22-year comeback album, for me, is a 2 out of 4 purple stars.
Okay.
All right, Robert, your rebuttal, sir.
My rebuttal is pretty much what I said in the intro. It's that shoegaze is one of those. It's one of those special genres, right? It has this quality of lo-fi, brooding, and even the name of the genre, shoegaze, it's kind of has this melancholy flavor to it, and I always use shoegaze as kind of to if I am in such a melancholy state, that's what I like to turn to, because it's something that you can slap it on your ears and just it fills your head, and you can just stare at the ground and smoke a cigarette and and just be kind of aloft in your melancholy. And so I think that this album does that very well, as do their earlier work. But it's not something that you really want to listen to, like, if you're not feeling sad, I guess. It's kind of like the sad people's music. There are some exceptions. Like there's a lot of songs that are kind of uplifting, but for the most part, it's shoegaze is sad people music. But I'm glad you didn't totally shit on it.
No, and I do like shoegaze. Like, it's not a problem with shoegaze music. It was just this particular venture.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't hate it. I just wasn't into it.
Understood.
So, all right. So 2 out of 4 for MBV by My Bloody Valentine. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, Robert is going to deliver Well, he's going to deliver something, that's for sure. We'll see what he has to say. I'm going to go drink a second beer because I'm scared. Anyway, we'll be right back. Stick around. You don't want to miss it.
The weekdays are made for working, but the weekends, those are made for gaming. Join Ellison Smith every Saturday for a new episode of Saltwater Gaming as he breaks down video games of all different genres, consoles, platforms, and eras. Get a bit of the old and a bit of the new, a bit of the action and a bit of the mystery. Get it all every Saturday on Saltwater Gaming, brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. There's a reason they call them lazy Sundays. There's nothing better than sitting around and enjoying the comforts of a good book. But what book should that be? Well, every Sunday, Eventide brings you The Bookseller, hosted by Jessica Gillen. Each week, Jessica breaks down a different book and tells you everything you need to know before cracking it open and getting lost in a whole new world. Tune in every Sunday for The Bookseller with Jessica Gillen, brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company.
Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes. Welcome back to Track Record, guys. It's comeback day is what we're doing today. We talking about comeback albums. I just got through talking about MBV by My Bloody Valentine. Gave it 2 out of 4 purple stars. Send me your tweets. I don't really care. That's fine. So now we're going into a review that, frankly, I'm terrified of. I was stuck on 2 albums, not sure what to give Robert. I wanted to give him something that I probably wasn't going to have a chance to give him again. It was torn between this album and 13 by Black Sabbath, but I have a feeling I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to give Robert a Black Sabbath album to talk about. So, and I think this show is a good opportunity for us to have each other try new things. Whether or not we like them is a different story, but it's good to try new things once in a while. And so the album I gave Robert for today is an album that I'm actually a pretty big fan of, and I was nervous about giving it to him. It's Dark Before Dawn by Breaking Benjamin. I'm just going to sit back and drink and listen to the things that Robert has to say. Robert, the floor is yours.
All right. Now, I did a little something different with my review this week. It's kind of like a thesis almost. And I'm going to call it my thesis about this, and you'll see why. Because it has to do with this album, but I broadened the spectrum of this analysis because it applied to something that was irking at me. So I know that Breaking Benjamin, I don't know if they're your favorite band. I know they're up there. I've seen you love them quite a lot.
They're in the top 10.
Okay.
But this is also a band that just kind of goes way back for me. So
okay,
it's a lot of nostalgic love there.
Understood. So Breaking Benjamin went on hiatus in 2009, and Dark Before Dawn was written primarily during that time by frontman Benjamin Burnley. Now, the album features a completely different lineup than previous releases. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, and it received all-around positive critical reception. And Breaking Benjamin have really garnered a huge and immensely loyal following over the years. And this type of music generally does have droves of followers. But here's the thing, though. Music in this genre the hard rock, alternative metal type stuff just doesn't sit well with me. And I think that this album finally helped to pinpoint my aversion. At first I thought my animus laid on the shoulders of the hard rock / alternative metal vocalists and the way that they deliver their vocals, or the generic nature of the hard rock alternative metal sound, or the lack of heaviness and dissonance in what is considered hard or metal music. But that didn't satisfy me quite enough. Yes, it's all those things still, but there is something else. And that fourth element that completes my superfecta of distaste is that this genre is emotionally masked. And I'll explain that. But Dark Before Dawn finally lit the bulb for me on this premise. How can an album so drenched in sad lyricism be so catchy and so full of major chords and fast pace and so overly cleanly produced? An example. Heavily distorted guitars are most effective, in my eyes, in creating a sense of aggression or chaos or inexplicable melancholy. But distorted guitars are not used to that effect in this genre or on this album. Instead, on this album, they feel used to simply satisfy a condition of genre. Instead of letting the songs take their shape naturally, these hard rock and alternative metal bands build a phony genre house around the songs, and then they hire, Hollywood's best interior decorator to make the house fashionable. Now, I used the word masked earlier, and that's really the best way that I can describe it. That the souls of the songs are masked. Regardless of what emotion or imagery or tone that is extracted from the rawest form of the songs, which is typically the lyricism, all those extra elements, the distorted guitar, the drums, the bass, the backing vocals, the synths, they never portray accurately how the songs should really feel. The true essence of the song is behind this mask of genre. It's like putting a bow of mediocrity on a present of potential. All of this being said, I do think Benjamin Burnley has one of the better voices in hard rock and is better at crafting melodies and harmonies than some of his peers. His lyricism is quite impressive as well, but as I said in my new thesis on hard rock, as I'm now calling it, that the lyricism is suffocated by all the bad things happening around it. So, I'm going to give Dark Before Dawn by Breaking Benjamin, the overly cleanly produced, emotionally masked comeback album that it is, 0 out of 4 purple stars.
Wow. Not even sure where to begin with that. I knew going into it you're probably going to hate it. That was fine. Similar to what you said about shoegaze, I think this is definitely a genre or style of music that is not for everyone. And there's not much of this genre left anymore, is the thing.
Good.
Most of the bands and artists who... Because this style of music really came to the forefront, I think, in the early 2000s when people were trying to find a way to get quote-unquote heavier music on the radio.
It's all a facade, man. It's
Like I
bullshit.
said, it's people. I think a lot of it was. I'm trying to think of the best way I can phrase this. Is a lot of this genre tends to be quality songwriters
fitting
trying to
their
fit a
awesome
mold.
music into a box of genre. That's exactly what it is. Just as I said. It's making it catchy. It's making it catchy and radio friendly for the sake of that. It's not actually letting the songwriting process take its true form. It's bullshit. I hate this kind of music, man.
I do think that part of the reasons I like this album so much is I think this was probably the most honest endeavor that this band had. Their first 3 or 4 albums were about as cookie cutter early 2000s as you can get. And bear in mind, back then, I mean, that's what I was into. I was in high school. I was an emotional little sad teenager. And so this is the kind of shit that I was into. But I was also into other shit. But, this is what was popular and accessible back then. So where I started to garner a lot more respect for Ben Burnley in particular was, he was fighting alcoholism, and they did the album right before this one called Dear Agony, which is the first album he ever wrote sober. And with that album, you could tell he was trying to figure out exactly what kind of music he wanted to make, because he'd been letting himself kind of just, write the generic shit so he could go get fucked up and go on tour. And so for me, I've always been really curious to follow his career to see where he goes as a songwriter, because we always hear about how musicians are like, they get into the substance abuse and stuff like that because that's what gives them their quote unquote inspiration. And I've known several musicians who have died because they refused to get off the stuff, get off whatever it was they were indulging in, because they were afraid they'd lose their edge, and then it wound up killing them. And so for him, it was a way for me to see how an artist takes control of his craft without that, again, for lack of a better term, inspiration. How does a musician who has spent his whole career writing songs under the influence move past that? And so for this one, for Dark Before Dawn, it was his second album sober. He'd been sober for a long time at this point, had more time to settle on what he wanted to do. He had a brand new band for this one, is another thing. This was him with a brand new lineup. The rest of the band, there was a huge legal. The reason they were on hiatus, there was a huge legal battle with some other bullshit, and so he got a brand new lineup, brand new songwriting team. So for this particular album, one of the reasons I like it so much, like I said before, is it was the first time to me Breaking Benjamin felt, as far as like lyricism goes, felt really genuine. Like they were like, almost like it's like they were on. It's like, okay, they're on to something with this one.
I agree with that.
It's the first step towards whatever's going to come next, which I'm curious to see. Because songs like Ashes of Eden, which they did on this album, never would have flown on their earlier stuff. Never would have flown on their earlier stuff. And I felt with that one, I was like, I think Ashes of Eden was their first real attempt at trying to break the mold a little bit. And instead of trying to fit a genre, to kind of do their own thing again, or do their own thing for the first time.
That would be lovely.
So, yeah. But again, this is my interpretation of it. Robert, of course, you have your own interpretation of it as well. Again, like I said about MBV, it's the beauty of music. It's subjective. One person's garbage is another person's treasure. But I can see where you're coming from with most of what you had to say. I think 0 is a little harsh, but it's your score. I'm not going to fight you on it. This is a band, like I said, that for me, they're nostalgic love. They're one of my top 10 favorites. Again, and I've said this before, for me, when I look at like a movie or an album, it's not just about the final product for me. I'm also interested in the process that they went through towards getting to that point. And a lot of times that has an influence on how I feel about an album or a movie as well. So that may have something to do with, again, how I feel about this album. But like I said, I'm not going to argue anybody on how they feel about something. You can't tell somebody how to feel about a piece of music or a film or a situation or whatever. So I'm not going to fight you on it. You feel how you feel. I will continue to listen to them in my car, guilt-free. And there's nothing you can do to take that away from me.
So the real life of these musicians affects how you view their art. You do not separate art from the person making the art.
Not usually. It depends on, I guess it depends on the story, really. There are some people who, because like we all hear, I came from nothing. I grew up on the street. My life was so hard. And I went from rags to riches. And you hear so many of those that you're almost, it's kind of like that last scene in 8 Mile where it's like, his name is Clarence and Clarence's parents have a really good marriage. You know, people putting on facades of coming from certain backgrounds. But yeah, like I always look at things like to give you a little bit of an off topic point of view. I like the movie Justice League a lot more than most people did because I'm aware of the hoops they had to go through to make that movie and the impossible odds they were put up against as far as the process of creating that film. So that when I see the finished product, I can say, hey, you know, yes, on the surface level, it's this good or this bad. But when you look at the shit they had to go through to get there, I can appreciate it more for what it is. And so with music, for me, it's, again, like I look at the story of Ben Burnley, you know, because Ben Burnley, a lot of people don't know this, has what's called wet brain. He was such a hardcore alcoholic, he actually has permanent brain damage.
Wow.
Yeah, so like if you meet him in person, he kind of slurs his speech like he is drunk.
Yeah.
And his movement is a little weird. His wet brain is basically a condition where he drank so much, he has like permanent effects to his body. So he basically, the symptoms of being drunk, some of the symptoms of being drunk never go away for him because it did that kind of damage to his brain.
It's like Ozzy, which would have been the other choice for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like what happened to Ozzy. Ozzy's brain is he keeps getting a clean bill of health, but there's no denying the fact he's got some brain damage there from what he did. And actually, Breaking Benjamin's album Dear Agony, the one I mentioned earlier, the cover art is actually Ben Burnley's CAT scan of his brain.
Wow.
So yeah, stuff like that I look at as it's the process, the journey he had to go through to getting this album made, the years spent in the legal system over the rights to the band and the music, things like that. Such
a humanitarian way to listen to music and view art. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is how I am. So if I ever like something that everybody else hates, it usually means I'm a big fan of the story. Unless it's The Room. Fuck that movie. But.
Just throw a little hate.
I did not hit it. I didn't hit it. It's bullshit. I did not hit it. It's bullshit. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Yeah, I'm never going to see that. There's no point.
Oh, you got to watch it once.
No, I just for a person who holds acting performance dear, like the cringe would cripple me. It's
definitely like, it's like for someone like me, I can watch The Room and go, this is so bad, but I have to experience it. But for like most people, I'm like, yeah, don't watch The Room. It's terrible.
There's plenty of other movies where
tuxedos.
Where there was one, what was it? It's like the Roller Skate 7 or something. There's some terrible movies out there that are just a lot of fun to watch. So I mean, I guess The Room is in that, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, that's how I approach music and movies, and so I can appreciate when somebody says like you did, or you don't like the thing, and I can appreciate that. But I look for and get different things out of music than most people do, I think. So
I think so. You have a nice outlook, a nice process of listening and consuming art.
Glad I got you to say something nice on this show.
It's been this has been a thinker of an episode.
Yeah, it has. This was kind of a mixed bag, but there's good and there's good fun to be found in mixed bags, I think. So,
yeah, unless it's a bag of dicks.
Oh, we went there.
What would a mixed bag of a bag of dicks be?
Well, if it's like the gift bag I found at Spencer's the other day, it's literally just a gift bag with different colored and different sized dicks on it.
Okay, that's a pretty mixed dick bag.
It's a mixed bag of dicks, yeah. I frequently I have road rage. It's genetic, and I will frequently yell at another car, "Go eat a bag of dicks!" And then I found the bag at Spencer's, and I was like, "Oh, I should get this bag." And then that way I can throw it at somebody and say, "Hey, eat a bag of dicks," and drive away.
They should make it edible.
Yeah.
Edible bag of dicks.
They make penis candy. I don't see why we can't make an edible penis bag.
They should make a variety of mixed bags. One will be like, like the different colors, different sizes, or like some will be like, circumcised versus uncircumcised. And then like some are just like hairy, and some have like nice landing strips, or like a boyzillion,
It'll be like the dude's sketchbook from Superbad, where he was just drawing dicks all the time.
Yes.
And with that, now that we've had a great conversation about penises. Is that the plural of penises? Peni?
Male sex appendages.
Yeah. So with that, Robert, I think we have a show, sir.
Oh, you didn't say that last time.
I didn't. I forgot. I realized that when I was listening to it in the car, I was like, I didn't declare last episode a show.
Yeah, you'll never be forgiven.
I will not. I'm going to have to do like that dude in the Da Vinci Code and like go like whip myself with chains, and
you better do that.
Okay.
You better have my name on your lips while you do it too.
Oh, yeah, I'm a kinky bastard. It's all right.
Robert. They always make it kind of like sexual in a way. It's weird.
A little bit, yeah. That way, it can't be totally asexual. It's got to be a little bit sexual. So
everything's a little bit sexual.
We're sexual. We're back for the year. We're doing good things. I'm curious to see what the next episode's going to be. By the way, we've stopped planning that far ahead. We're no longer going to tell you guys what's coming next week. You're going to have to listen to find out.
Yeah, it's not laziness. It's just we're cutting time off of one show so we don't explain ourselves about the same shit twice.
Exactly. It's good for you guys. It's good for us, and it gives us some more time to think on it.
Yeah.
So it's for the greater good.
And really, if you guys have like any categories that you want us to assign albums to each other in, do that. We're all over the web. It's worldwide.
I'm gonna get us a Twitter set up so that way people can tweet at us.
Good.
And then we'll have that ready for the next show, and then you guys can interact with us a little bit more. Good things on the horizon. Good things coming. We'll do some plugs here real quick. Make sure you guys check out Data Drain, which is Robert's project with his wife Candace. Great industrial EDM is what we're calling it.
Well, we're kind of going all across the board of electronic music. This last single that we just came out with, called Grimoire, is kind of it's pretty much trance. It's like a hard trance.
Okay.
So we're like trance, techno, industrial. I think we're gonna throw some synthwave vibes on a track for our EP coming out probably next month.
Sweet. So check both of those out. Those are available on the Eventide Entertainment Bandcamp. You can get links to all that on our website and on the Facebook, on the Book of the Face. Citizen 7's got some new stuff coming out soon.
Yes.
We just dropped the first release from your upcoming album on Mike Talks Funny yesterday. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, go check out the latest episode of Mike Talks Funny. We got some new music from Citizen 7 on there. I won't say any more about it, though. I want you to go listen to it, people.
Yes, please.
So go listen to it.
Thank you.
And just lots more good stuff coming, too. Make sure you guys are following along on Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff for everything we got going on here at Eventide Entertainment.
We do it right.
Awkward pause.
Long silence.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and call it then. Thanks again so much for tuning in. We'll be back again next week with a new theme and a new set of albums to tear apart or show some love to. Who knows? We'll see. Only time will tell. Find out in 7 days, people.
Fuckers.
Find out in 7 days. You fuckers.
That's why you said that. Find out in 7 days, you fuckers. What do I care? Give a shit.
All right. So that's our show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.
Later, fuckers.